the sky-high platforms that owned the disco floor to the humble clogs that shuffled through a generation, every shoe from the 1970s tells a story. And some of those stories are way wilder than you'd ever imagine. Today, we're unlacing the secret history of the most outrageous shoes of the decade. And trust me, they didn't just walk the streets, they shaped a generation. To really get the wild footwear of the 1970s, you have to get the decade itself. It was this 10-year cocktail of rebellion, glam, and cultural revolution. The peace and love vibes from the 60s didn't just fade away, they just put on a crazier, more electric outfit. This was the era of disco, glam rock, and punk, and every single one of these scenes needed its own uniform, starting from the ground up. Fashion became a playground for identity. It was all about shattering conventions and expressing yourself in the boldest way possible. And what's bolder than a shoe that literally puts you head and shoulders above everyone else? Or one built on a chunk of solid wood? The shoes of the 70s weren't just accessories, they were declarations. So, let's jump into the wildest, most iconic shoes that made the decade unforgettable. No shoe absolutely screams 1970s like the platform. With their chunky heels and ridiculously thick soles, platforms were the undisputed kings and queens of the decade. But their story is much older than disco. Platform shoes have been around for centuries, but the 70s took them to entirely new heights, literally. The trend was kicked into high gear by the glam rock scene, with artists like David Bowie in his Ziggy Stardust persona turning his shoes into pure performance art.
Every time I thought I got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet.
Bowie didn't just wear platforms, he became a different creature in them. They were a key part of his alien, androgynous, larger-than-life character. In fact, legend has it that a young pre-fame Freddie Mercury once worked at a London boot shop, where he personally fitted Bowie for a pair of platform boots. Soon, everyone from Elton John to the guys in Kiss was stomping around in their own sky-high heels. These weren't just shoes, they were an act of gender-bending rebellion, embraced by men and women in a way that would have scandalized earlier decades. We're talking heels up to 5 inches high, forcing an entire generation to pretty much relearn how to walk. But platforms had a practical side too. The decade's biggest fashion trend was super long, flared bell-bottoms. You needed some serious height just to keep your hems from dragging on the ground. Platforms were the perfect solution, letting you own the disco dance floor without tripping over your own pants. If the platform was all about glamorous excess, the clog was its down-to-earth bohemian cousin. The clog, a shoe with a history stretching back to medieval Europe as footwear for farmers, was suddenly the definition of cool. Its journey from the factory floor to the fashion world is one of the decade's most unexpected twists. The clog's popularity in the 70s was tied directly to the hippie movement. With its natural materials, a solid wood sole and a simple leather upper, it was the perfect fit for the counterculture's focus on all things organic and comfortable. It was the anti-fashion shoe, which of course is exactly what made it so fashionable. They were comfy, easy to slip on, and made that satisfying rhythmic clack-clack sound that announced your arrival. Brands like Mir and Sven clogs blew up, and soon you couldn't flip through a magazine without seeing them paired with bell-bottoms and flowy dresses. The Swedish clog, in particular, became a unisex sensation, worn by men and women, often sockless. That clunky, ugly shape, once associated with the working class, became a statement of laid-back, intellectual cool. The humble clog even got a disco makeover with the Candy Slide, a high-heeled mule with a plastic sole molded to look like wood, which became a staple on dance floors everywhere. Okay, but maybe the strangest, most quintessentially 70s shoe of them all was the Earth shoe. It was invented back in the late 50s by a Danish yoga instructor named Anna Kalso, and it featured a truly bizarre negative heel. The sole was thinner at the heel than at the toes, forcing your heel to sit lower than the ball of your foot. The whole idea was to mimic walking barefoot in the sand, which Kalso believed led to better posture. The shoe launched in the US on April 1, 1970, just 3 weeks before the very first Earth Day. Talk about good timing. They rebranded from the clunky Kalso minus heel shoes to the much catchier Earth shoes, and a phenomenon was born. Let's be honest, they weren't exactly lookers. With their boxy toe and weird sole, they were often called just plain ugly. But that was a huge part of their appeal. Wearing them was an anti-fashion statement. They became a counterculture symbol that showed you cared more about your posture and the planet than about trends. Sales exploded, reportedly peaking at $14 million in 1976, before the company went bankrupt a year later, overwhelmed by copycat brands. While the health claims were debated, the Earth shoe's legacy was set. It perfectly captured the eco-conscious, health-obsessed spirit of the 70s. It's clear the 70s had some of the most iconic shoes in history. We've talked about some wild ones, but I really want to know what you think. What was your favorite 70s shoe? Or which one do you find the most ridiculous? Drop your memories and thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. While disco divas and hippies were doing their thing, another powerful force was taking over: rock and roll. And the unofficial boot of the rock scene was the Friar boot. Founded way back in 1863, Friar was one of America's oldest shoemakers, originally crafting boots for factory workers. But in the 70s, their tough, high-quality leather boots became a symbol of rugged, rebellious authenticity. The campus boot, a clunky square-toed style with a 2-inch heel, became a must-have on college campuses. Guys wore them with tight jeans and women paired them with granny dresses. The most sought-after color was a blonde leather shade people called banana. These boots were built to last, a real middle finger to the fast fashion that was just starting to pop up. Friar boots were more than just shoes. They were a status symbol for the effortlessly cool. A 1976 New York Times article mentioned that stars like Barbra Streisand, Bette Midler, and Carole King were all on the waiting list for a pair. Rockers like Bruce Springsteen also helped cement their legendary status. Owning a pair of Friar boots meant you were in the know, someone who got quality craftsmanship and had that rebellious, free-spirited American vibe. You can't talk about 70s shoes without giving a massive shout-out to the knee-high boot. Worn with miniskirts or tucked into tight flared jeans, these boots were pure confidence and bold, sexy attitude. They came in a ton of different styles, from sleek leather versions to lace-up granny boots that gave a nod to the 1920s. But one of the most iconic looks of the decade was the crinkle boot. Often made of shiny, wet-look vinyl or soft, crinkled patent leather, these boots had a slouchy, textured look that was both weird and chic. They usually had a chunky block heel and came in every color you could imagine, from classic brown to vibrant look-at-me greens and blues. Icons like Pam Grier turned the knee-high boot into a symbol of female empowerment. These weren't just for looking good, they were for taking charge. There was real power in the click-clack sound of a confident woman walking down the street in her knee-highs. They were a statement of independence and a key part of the powerful, assertive style so many women owned in the 1970s. So, the platform, the clog, the earth shoe, the Friar boot, and the knee-high boot. Each one is so much more than just leather and wood or vinyl and rubber. They're artifacts from a decade of radical change. These shoes were symbols of liberation on the dance floor, emblems of a connection to nature, tools for rock and roll rebellion, and declarations of self-expression. They carried a generation through protests, parties, and a massive cultural shift. The wild, wonderful, and sometimes wacky shoes of the 1970s prove that fashion is never just about what you wear. It's about who you are, what you stand for, and where you're headed. And the fact that we still see their influence today proves that real style never truly dies. Thanks for taking this trip down memory lane with me. If you had fun on this secret history tour, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into fashion's greatest hits. And don't forget to answer my question in the comments. Which 70s shoe would you rock today?